Chapter 36 of the book of Isaiah. We're chugging right along. We're about halfway done. Thank you for joining me. It's always a pleasure. Now it came to pass in the 14th year of King Hezekiah that Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the defense cities of Judah and took them. Note. Now this is the third time that the Holy Spirit records the facts relating to Hezekiah and the proposed attack by Assyria against Jerusalem. Thereby it denotes its significance. Its significance lies in the fact that this episode is a symbol of the future invasion of Israel by the Antichrist. Well, as Sennacherib was stopped, so will the Antichrist. Verse 2. And the king of Assyria sent Rabshakeh from Lachish to Jerusalem unto King Hezekiah with a great army. And he stood by the conduit of the upper pool in the highway of the fuller's field. Notes. Rabshakeh seemingly was the head of the Assyrian expedition against Jerusalem. He is there to demand the surrender of Jerusalem. And the conduit of the upper pool is the same place Isaiah stood with Ahaz about 28 years before, found in chapter 7, verse 3 of this book. Verse 3. Then came forth unto him Eliakim, Hilkiah's son, which was over the house, and Shebna the scribe, and Joanne, Asaph's son, the recorder. Notes. Now, Eliakim and Shebna were sent outside the city to meet with Rabshakeh. This is actually the same Shebna whom Isaiah prophesied against in chapter 22. Verse 4. And Rabshakeh said unto them, Say ye now to Hezekiah, Thus saith the great king, the king of Assyria, What confidence is this wherein you trust? Notes. That's a very interesting question right there. Of the three Assyrians' envoys, Rabshakeh alone obtains a mention in Isaiah because he was the spokesman. He was probably chosen for such because he could speak Hebrew probably pretty good. He refers to the king of Assyria as the great king. This is meant to insinuate that no king anywhere in the world is as great as the king of Assyria. However, Rabshakeh is to find, to his dismay, that this king, Sennacherib, is subservient to another king. And of course, I'm talking about the Lord of Glory. Rabshakeh is actually chiding Hezekiah about his trust being placed in Egypt. This tells us that trusting man rather than God exposes the believer to the contempt of the world. You're always leaning on the arm of flesh. Not that I have anything against President Obama, but there were so many people that have been riding along this hopey-changey thing, and it's simply the arm of flesh. And it has turned out to be greatly ruinous. That being said, verse 5. I say, sayest thou, but they are but vain words, I have counsel and strength for war. Now on whom do you trust that you rebel against me? Notes. It does seem to me that Rabshakeh had obtained a copy of the proposed agreement between Judah and Egypt, or that the very words had been verbally reported to him, but somehow he knew about it, and he's going to rub some salt into this wound right here. Verse 6. Lo, you trust in the staff of this broken reed on Egypt, whereon if a man lean, it will go into his hand and pierce it. So is Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to all who trust in him. Notes. Now, when the Assyrians spoke of this broken reed, namely Egypt, he was speaking from knowledge instead of just merely boasting. He knew that the particular Pharaoh of that time was not to be trusted. You couldn't really depend on him. Well, you can't really fully trust in any man, but this one was pretty rotten. And history certainly does show that. Verse 7. But if you say to me, We trust in the Lord our God, is it not he whose high places and whose altars Hezekiah has taken away, and said to Judah and to Jerusalem, You shall worship before this altar? Notes. Well, to destroy the fashionable materials and corrupt ceremonies of worldly religion is actually understood, it's actually misunderstood by the world and accounted as some kind of sacrilege. Rabshakeh was totally ignorant of the ways of God and had misunderstood Hezekiah's destruction of these idol groves, thinking it had somehow offended God when actually that kind of activity rather pleased him very well. There was but one altar that they should go to. Verse 8. Now therefore give pledges, I pray you, to my master the king of Assyria, and I will give you 2,000 horses, if you be able on your part to set riders upon them. Notes. Now this sounds crazy, but it's done so intentionally. Rabshakeh is continuing to show reproach to Judah. Verse 9. How then will you turn away the face of one captain of the least of my master's servants, and put your trust on Egypt for chariots and for horsemen? Notes. Now, Judah's true weakness was really actually her lack of dependence on God, not her lack of military preparation. Verse 10. And am I now come up without the Lord against this land to destroy it? The Lord said unto me, Go up against this land and destroy it. Notes. Now, Rabshakeh's statements right here make it obvious that the prophecy given by Isaiah some years before had been read or at least seen by him somehow. Its use by him was a clever ruse to persuade the people to disobey God. So we just need to get that out of the way. When unconverted men quote the Bible in support of their projects or doctrines, they contradict themselves and expose their ignorance of the Scriptures and their hatred of God. He couldn't have cared less about Judah or Jerusalem or Israel in a whole. Neither Sennacherib nor his captain Rabshakeh believed in this God. Their statements are made from the viewpoints of ego. I mean, golly, is it not that obvious? They imagine themselves to be so high and mighty that if there is a God, they are his princely ones in the earth. They think that he's actually blessing them. And Sennacherib actually misunderstood Isaiah's prophecy. It was certainly true that God did ordain the Assyrians, without them really being aware of such, to overthrow certain countries, which included the northern kingdom of Israel, and also to chasten Judah. However, what they didn't get is that he never gave them a commission to destroy Judah. So in this, they were overstepping the boundaries, and they would definitely face dire consequences. Verse 11. Then said Eliakim and Shebna and Joah unto Rabshakeh, Speak, I pray you, unto your servants in the Syrian language, for we understand it. And speak not to us in the Jews' language in the ears of the people who are on the wall. Notes. Now Rabshakeh spoke some Hebrew, desiring that the people hear his words, as well as their leaders, in order to weaken their will to resist. The request of the Jews will be ignored. Incidentally, regarding the three Jews addressed here, Eliakim, Shebna, well, they stand in contrast. Got to clear my throat. Eliakim is actually a type of Christ, and hence he is symbolic of the Spirit. Shebna is a type of Satan, and hence he is a type of the flesh. Isaiah chapter 22, verse 15 through 24. You can kind of see it there. Shebna strongly encourages seeking the help of the Egyptians, while Eliakim strongly urges trust in God. The majority in Jerusalem at that time followed Shebna, while a small remnant followed Isaiah and Eliakim. You can find that in Isaiah chapter 1, verse 9. In fact, almost all the religious leaders of Jerusalem followed the carnal path of Shebna, and they reaped the fruits thereof. Verse 12. But Rabshakeh said, Has my master sent me to your master and to you to speak these words? Has he not sent me to the men who sit upon the wall, that they may eat their own dung and drink their own urine with you? Notes, now, that's rather insulting. The language used here by Rabshakeh shows his rather strong contempt for Judah. Verse 13. Then Rabshakeh stood and cried with a loud voice in the Jewish language and said, Hear ye the words of the great king, the king of Assyria. Notes. Well, the devil likes to cry with a loud voice. He also says it in a language that we easily understand. Verse 14. Thus saith the king, Let not Hezekiah deceive you, for he shall not be able to deliver you. Notes. Rabshakeh claims to speak for the king Sennacherib. Well, the devil has plenty of envoys. Therefore, the people had a choice. They could believe Rabshakeh or they could believe Hezekiah. If the people had not had strong spiritual leaderships in the persons of Hezekiah and Isaiah, they would have no doubt have listened to what this ratchet jaw Rabshakeh had to say. Verse 15. Neither let Hezekiah make you trust in the Lord, saying, The Lord will surely deliver us. This city shall not be delivered into the hand of the king of Assyria. Notes. The words of Isaiah given to Hezekiah no doubt had come to the ears of Sennacherib. So now we have the word of the Lord versus the word of Sennacherib. And guess which one's going to come out on top? Verse 16. Hearken not to Hezekiah, for thus saith the king of Assyria, Make an agreement with me by a present, and come out to me. And eat ye every one of his vine, and every one of his fig tree, and drink ye every one of the waters of his own cistern. Notes. In other words, the war will cease if you will make an agreement with me. This has ever been the devil's ploy. The message is compromise, which is never of God. Verse 17. Until I come and take you away to a land like your own land, a land of corn and wine, a land of bread and vineyards. Notes. Now, what a joke this actually is. If you will let us take over your land, we'll go ahead and give you something that's just as good and possibly even better. Now, despite the golden promises, the plan was to take Judah captive into Assyria, as they had already taken Ephraim. This is Satan's plan for the modern Christian as well. He promises you everything, but only gives captivity and bondage, ultimately. It might taste good for a little while, but in the long run, it's going to be really, really sour. Verse 18. Beware lest Hezekiah persuade you, saying, The Lord shall deliver us. Has any of the gods of the nations delivered his land out of the hand of the king of Assyria? Notes. Now, the boast of Rabshakeh was actually not very hollow, at least regarding these gods of the nations. As far as the Assyrians were concerned, this was just a religious war. Their success in the religious character of their wars was justified by this boast. They basically treated God as if he was just one of these many other gods and really of no consequence. Verse 19, and this is going to bear that out even further. Where are the gods of Hamath and Arphad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim? And have they delivered Samaria out of my hand? Notes. Now in this passage, Rabshakeh boasts of his god Ashur over the gods of Hamath and Arphad. Well, Sennacherib sees no distinction between the cities where Jehovah was worshipped, as supposedly in Samaria, than those which acknowledged other gods. As Samaria fell, which supposedly worshipped God, why should not Jerusalem fall? And therefore he equates Samaria's God with Judah's. This is going to turn out to be a really big mistake. Verse 20. Who are they among all the gods of these lands that have delivered their land out of my hand, that the Lord should deliver Jerusalem out of my hand? Notes. In this statement, Rabshakeh places Jehovah in the same category as the idol gods of all the other nations. That Jehovah would deliver Judah, there was no doubt. However, the manner in which he delivered them was because of this insult. He's thinking he would humiliate them so greatly that Sennacherib would not recover. As well, Jerusalem would not suffer the loss of one single person or even an arrow being shot against its wall. So much for the god Asher. Well, God's going to straighten that situation out rather quickly. Verse 21. But they held their peace and answered him not a word, for the king's commandment was saying, Answer him not. Notes. There are occasions when faith's most effective reply to insulting language is the dignity of silence, and her best refuge is prayer. Job was a good example of this. If you turn to the book of Job, one of the best things he did was just simply not even dignify Mr. Elihu with a response. Verse 22. Then came Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, who was over the household, and Shebna the scribe, and Joah, the son of Asaph, the recorder, to Hezekiah with their clothes rent, and told him the words of Rabshakeh. Notes. Now, if one will notice, Shebna the scribe was dressed in sackcloth, the same as Eliakim. Well, there the similarity ended. Eliakim wanted the will of God, while Shebna wanted his place and position salvaged. Well, this describes far too many Christian believers. They're worried more about their position in life than they are doing the will of God. And there are many doctrines out there right now that teach your purpose-driven life and all this other stuff. While your life definitely does have a purpose, it's contained solely within this book right here. This is God's will. Read it. Chapter 37 now. And it came to pass, when King Hezekiah heard it, that he rent his clothes, and covered himself with sackcloth, and went into the house of the Lord. Notes. This chapter is actually a continuation of the previous. Therefore, the two constitute but one single narrative. Whatever difficulties of faithlessness that had previously plagued Hezekiah have now been thrown off, and he is doing what he should have done all along. He is taking his difficulties to God in prayer. The Assyrians are now threatening his destruction, and he realizes he really doesn't have any choice. He's got to have to go to God, or he's going to face some pretty dire consequences at these ruthless heathen monarchs. Verse 2. And he sent Eliakim, who was over the household, and Shebna the scribe, and the elders of the priests, covered with sackcloth, unto Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amoz. Notes. Now, they should have done this a long time ago. As a matter of fact, they should have done this at the very beginning, and they should have never have stopped. Verse 3. And they said unto him, Thus saith Hezekiah, This day is a day of great trouble, and of rebuke, and of blasphemy, for the children are come to the birth, and there is not strength to bring forth. Notes. Now the passage where it says the children are come to the birth and whatnot, this was a proverbial phrase for a time of extreme difficulty. Judah was in sore trouble and was expecting deliverance. However, it seemed now as if she would not have enough strength to go through the crisis, but would indeed perish through weakness. Verse 4. It may be the Lord your God will hear the words of Rabshakeh, whom the king of Assyria, his master, has sent to reproach the living God, and will prove the words which the Lord your God has heard. Wherefore lift up your prayer for the remnant that is left. Notes. Now notice the manner in which this verse Hezekiah couches his terminology. He doesn't plead with the Lord regarding the merit of Judah, but rather the blasphemy of Rabshakeh. He knows that neither he nor Judah have any merit with God. This attitude should be a model for us as well. You should never think that God just simply owes you something. The remnant that is left refers to the great number of Judeans who have already been taken captive from the other cities of Judah, with only those who are in Jerusalem remaining. Verse 5. So the servants of King Hezekiah came to Isaiah, and Isaiah said unto them, Thus shall you say unto your master, Thus saith the Lord, Be not afraid of the words that you have heard, wherewith the servants of the king of Assyria have blasphemed me. Notes. Now the blasphemy of Rabshakeh was against the Lord, and would be answered in kind. Verse 7. Behold, I will send a blast upon him, and he shall hear a rumor, and return to his own land, and I will cause him to fall by the sword in his own land. Notes. The words, I will send a blast upon him, rather mean I will put a spirit within him. In effect, I will remove from him the spirit of pride and arrogancy, and instead will infuse into his heart a spirit of hesitation and fear. God's going to start messing with him a little bit, if you know what I mean. He's going to distract him. When the Lord takes a hand in a situation, this verse gives us the proof of the ample provision that he has to do whatever he desires. The blast was the sending of an angel from heaven who would kill 185,000 Assyrian soldiers in one night. Sennacherib would give up his plans for the destruction of Jerusalem and return to his own land. Ultimately, he was going to be rebelled against by his own two sons, or his own sons, I should say. Don't remember how many there actually were. But they were going to rise up against him and kill him. So, hey, that's what you get. You mess with God, he's going to answer. Verse 8. So Rabshakeh returned and found the king of Assyria warring against Libnah, for he had heard that he was departed from Lachish. Notes. After Rabshakeh concluded his mission, not realizing the wheels that he had actually set in motion, he returned to Sennacherib, for he found him attempting to destroy Libnah. It seems that this was the next stronghold on the way to Egypt. However, verse 9, And he heard say concerning Tirhakah, king of Ethiopia, He has come forth to make war with you. And when he heard it, he sent messengers to Hezekiah, saying, Notes. Now, Tirhakah, king of Ethiopia, is among the most famous of the monarchs belonging to this particular period. It seems this king had defeated Egypt and now ruled both Ethiopia and Egypt. And the movements of Mr. Tirhakah provoked rather than alarmed Sennacherib, who had already defeated one Egyptian army a short time before. He was confident of success against any effort that the Egyptians might actually take. Notes. Well, actually I should say I'm really hoping I got that guy's name right. Tirhakah, I guess you could say. Tirhakah. Verse 10, Thus shall you speak to Hezekiah king of Judah, saying, Let not your God in whom you trust deceive you, saying, Jerusalem shall not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria. Notes. Now, I think it's kind of interesting that Sennacherib recognized God as Jehovah God, the God of the Jews, but put him on the same par with the other gods of the nations, and he really didn't have any respect for them because he just walked right in and just took over the land, and it was no big deal at all. He was a legend killer, if you know what I mean. That's what he thought. There was no religious god out there that was going to stop him from doing whatever he wanted. Well, he's going to find out that he's swapping punches with someone a whole lot bigger than him. Verse 11. Behold, you have heard what the kings of Assyria have done to all lands by destroying them utterly, and shall you be delivered? Notes. Now, in this time period, in fact, Sennacherib was the most powerful monarch on the face of the earth. Therefore, these boasts were not really hollow threats. He truly intended to destroy everything and take it over. Verse 12. Have the gods of the nations delivered them which my fathers have destroyed, as Gozan and Haran and Rezeph and the children of Eden, which were in Telassar? Notes. He's counting and enumerating here areas which he had just completely destroyed and took over. Wasn't no big deal at all for him. Verse 13. Where is the king of Hamath, and the king of Arphad, and the king of the city of Sepharvaim, Hena, and Iva? Notes. Sennacherib, like Satan, he delights in boasting of his victories. Look at me, look at how big I am, and how many things I have just totally destroyed, and you're next on my list. Well, be that as it may, verse 14, we're going to find the answer to that little problem. And Hezekiah received the letter from the hand of the messengers and read it. And Hezekiah went up into the house of the Lord and spread it before the Lord. Notes. Well, this last message was sent to Hezekiah in a letter in 2 Chronicles 32:17. The word letters is actually used, signifying plurality and indicating an arrogant, insulting, and boastful letter. The spreading of the letter before the Lord did not imply on Hezekiah's part that God did not know its contents previously, but was designed thusly that Sennacherib's reproach of the God of Judah would be ever before the Lord. I guess you could kind of say this was like an Eat at Joe's sign with insulting words written all over it. And Hezekiah is saying, look, this is what this guy's saying about you. You going to let him get away with that? Verse 15. And Hezekiah prayed unto the Lord, saying, O Lord of hosts, God of Israel, who dwells between the cherubims, you are the God, even you alone, of the kingdoms of all the earth. You have made heaven and earth. Notes. Hezekiah's prayer is very interesting here and well worth the attention. It would be the same that we should actually pray today, with one exception. Now we are actually admonished to pray to the Lord in the name of Jesus instead, but this was a pretty good model, and Hezekiah is finally getting it right. John chapter 16, verse 23, you can go ahead and read it sometime. Verse 17. Incline your ear, O Lord, and hear. Open your eyes, O Lord, and see. And hear all the words of Sennacherib, which has sent to reproach the living God. Notes. This is a conscious pleading of the promise made to Solomon. It's found in 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 15. Hezekiah is calling to account this promise, as we can also call to account the many promises made in the Word of God, such as Mark 9:23 and Matthew 18:18 and John 14:14 and chapter 15, verse 7 of the book of John. Petition that is offered to the Lord without being based on the Word of God is rather fruitless. So you can really see that Hezekiah is really getting his act together. With that being said, we'll have to pick up, unfortunately, in chapter 37, verse 18 of the book of Isaiah. It's very unfortunate that I have to cut off this beautiful prayer right now, but we'll pick up right there. Thank you, and God bless. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.